What is going on, guys? Recently did a poll on Patreon, and the winner was single shot rifles. Gave a bunch of different categories of stuff to record, and the winner was single shot rifles. So if single shot rifles interest you, stay tuned for this episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics. Today, single shot rifles, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that, I'm going to throw in a rapid-fire version of the bio. If you've heard it before or don't care, go ahead and skip ahead while you're listening or reaching down to skip ahead. If you could skip the follow, like, subscribe, leave some stars, that would be appreciated. Blessed to have served in military, law enforcement, combat veteran, private contractor, competition shooter, lifelong hunter, guide. Blessed by God that He got me through all those things so I could share this firsthand training, knowledge, experience with you to serve you today. Let's dive into the podcast. Now, caveat, there's a lot of single-shot rifles of the past. Obviously, muzzle loaders were single shots. I'm not going to be talking about the Brown Bess. I'm not going to be talking about a Remington rolling block. I'm not going to be talking about the old single shots unless there's like a modern, fairly common reproduction of them. That said, we're going to start with number one, being my favorite on the list, the Ruger number one. If I was picking one on the list, it would probably be the Ruger number one. The Ruger number one is a phenomenal rifle. In my opinion, one of the most beautiful rifles, if you count the international version. Just one of the most beautiful rifles ever made, period. Not just single shots, just it's a beautiful rifle. My second favorite would be the Tropical, but the Ruger number one, if you're not familiar, it's got what I would call a aesthetically pleasing, beautiful swept down trigger guard that you hit and it unlocks the action. You slip in a round. So it's not like you're thinking a single shot break open shotgun, but instead you hit that trigger guard and the action opens and you slip a cartridge in. They come in some really cool calibers. They have in the past. They usually only make a few at a time, maybe only one at a time, special runs, but they've made some really cool calibers in the past. Notable would be the 7x57 Mauser. That would be a really good, cool cartridge in one of these, but they're really strong actions. They go all the way up into some bruiser cartridges. But the Ruger number one, yes, they do make models with iron sights, and they have in the past made stainless steel models, of which I am a fan. On their website right now, it lists the 75th anniversary edition in .270 Winchester. It'd be a fine rifle. They list the 6.5 Creedmoor, which is a fine cartridge, but it doesn't have iron sights, so I'm less interested. The 7x57 or the .275 Rigby, which is a way cooler name, I think. There's nothing wrong with the name 7x57, but .275 Rigby they list with iron sights. It's blued steel, but it's a beautiful gun. And they list a really, really cool one. And these, I should mention, they're Lipsy's distributor exclusives except for the 75th anniversary model. But they list a .257 Weatherby, which I'm going to be honest, except for custom guns, I wasn't aware that you could get a .257 Weatherby in something other than a Weatherby. If you're not familiar with the .257 Weatherby, it's a screaming fast, high-velocity quarter-bore 25 caliber. Phenomenal open plains, southwestern kind of cartridge. Think of it like a 25-06 on steroids. But the Ruger number one, it's a beautiful rifle. They've made several other beautiful models in the past. Again, they've even made a stainless steel. And I'm partial, although I don't see one now, of the international model, which means that the stock goes all the way out to the end of the barrel. Now the Winchester, model 1885. This is also a beautiful rifle. Similar style action to what we just talked about. But the 1885, as you might imagine, the name, it came out in 1885, or at least was designed in 1885. A lot of times they're designed and they come out a year or two later. But the Winchester model 1885. They still currently make this gun and list it on their website. Some pretty cool cartridges listed in their centerfire version. The .22 Hornet, That's really cool. The 223, the 243, the 6.5 Creedmoor. Pretty cool rifle. Beautifully aesthetic and pleasing. Now, there used to be a rifle called the Dakota. They went out of business, came back as the Park West Arms. If you're talking about aesthetically pleasing, if you have some extra gold Cougarans clanging around in your pocket and you don't know what to do with them, per their website, starts out at just shy of $8,000. So if you want to shoot really slow in style and spend a lot of money, these are it. They are classy, they're beautiful. Since we were talking about beautiful weapons, beautiful single shots, I just thought this would be one to mention. It is currently in production as far as I'm aware. Now, they don't all have to cost as much as the guns we've talked about. The guns we've talked about heretofore have not been exactly budget friendly. The next we're going to talk about, I would consider it like a mid-tier option of single shot rifles. And that is going to be Henry. The Henry single shots are not nearly as expensive as the options we have just mentioned. You can get it in kind of just a classic blued steel, or you can get it with a very Henry-esque, shiny, bling brass finish on it. Now, these do kind of break open like your classic break open single shot shotguns. Little lever on the top, you swing it, and the gun breaks open. Available, listed on their website or at least being made, listed on their website. I don't know what's actually you can get right now, but just per their website, 223 5.56 NATO, 243 308, 44 mag, 44 special, 4570. They also list the brass and 44 and 4570. Some other calibers, they list 30-30, 357, 38 special. List the 350 Legend if anybody wants that, the 450 Bushmaster, and the 360 Buckhammer. Now I clicked on the one that maybe interests me the most, because if I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about it for a youth rifle mostly, and it lists the 243 at 7.10 pounds, 22-inch barrel. The 30-30, 22-inch barrel, and 6.69 pounds. And that 243, this is full MSRP on their website, $597. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is very similar to this, and it's no longer being made as far as I'm aware. The company is not producing these rifles anymore, but there's a lot of them out there, and they're not crazy expensive. And they are the H&R Handy Rifle. The H&R Handy Rifle was around a long time. There was whole forums and all kinds of things. There was a barrel exchange program where you could send in your gun, and for not a lot of money you could get a different barrel, and you could experiment with all kinds of different barrels and loads, and some pretty unique ones like 35 Whelen. And again, they're not being made anymore, but for a long time the H&R Handy Rifles were around. And a lot of them got used because they were kind of, in the day, a budget rifle. A lot of times a youth rifle, a lot of times a budget rifle. I got to imagine some of them were used pretty hard. So I would reckon that you could find them for a decent price if you kept your eye open at gun shows, gun stores, things like that. And a lot of different calibers that they were offered in. Now, I don't want to give a bunch of bunk information. Wikipedia said the H&R went out of business in 2015. And the only thing I could find were on forums. I don't know that I trust AI. But they made some really cool calibers. One thing I remember them making, they made a combo kit. And this is really cool. They made a combo kit, I think geared towards youth, but it'd be good for anybody because it would handle just about anything. They made a combo kit with a 22 long rifle, a 243, and then a shotgun barrel. And I don't remember if it was 410 or 20 gauge. Maybe they offered both. But talk about a combo. Let's say you're like a tactical guy and you just excrete black polymer, and your socks have cargo pockets, and your steering wheel's got pick rail on it. You're like the tactical guy, but you kind of see the logic in having hunting and game getting tools. You got a bunch of ARs, a bunch of black polymer pistols. That combo kit would cover pretty much all your bases. You still got to learn to hunt and still got to get the skill, but a 22 long rifle, a shotgun, and a 243 interchangeable barrels that you could just roll up and not take a bunch of money out of your AR budget, that's a pretty cool combo. Now, if you're into the classic lines, classic looks, Cimarron and Pedersoli, they both make reproductions of the older single shot style rifles. I am not, I like gun and firearm history. This is not my forte, my area of expertise. If you want like an older reproduction that's safe to fire modern loads and you want to go hunt with it, you want to take it out, like a Sharps reproduction, 4570, they can be had modern. Now, I should say that Shiloh Sharps is still a company. I don't know if it's the original or they bought the name, but they are still in business. They are quite expensive. They have one listed right now on their website, a little over $4,000, 4570, 30-inch heavy octagon barrel. So Shiloh Sharps, you can still get those. Now, almost on the completely opposite end of the spectrum from that, still a single shot, but if you want, modern finishes like Cerakote or stainless steel and polymer, CVA. CVA lists one of the more affordable, still in production rifles on the list today. They've got a stainless steel version. Now that's cool. I don't see any with iron sights. That saddens me, but 50%, right? Listed in 4570, 350 Legend, 35 Whalen, 444 Marlin, which is really cool caliber, might I add, and the 450 Bushmaster. I also see a Scout model listed, burnt bronze Cerakote, a handsome rifle, even if it does lack iron sights. Kind of saddens me because it seems to me that if you were going to hunt with us, and this is not just picking on CVA, this is most of the ones we've talked about, or a lot of the ones we've talked about, it seems to me that if you wanted to hunt with a single shot, then you're kind of into traditional stuff. And if you're into traditional hunting, right, why would you want a scope? Wouldn't you want iron sights? Now, somebody out there might want an optic on a single shot, but it kind of seems to me, one, it ruins the aesthetic of it, and two, just if you're going to hunt traditional and take on the extra challenge of hunting with a single shot, wouldn't you want the also added tradition of hunting with an iron sight? And I guess looking at their website, they just called the CVA Scout. They just list different finishes and different, aesthetically pleasing variants of that. Now, I should mention Thompson Center. They made the Contender and the Encore. I don't know what's going on with Thompson Center. I don't really know if they're in business, out of business, what's going on with them. But growing up, they kind of were the single shot, especially with pistols. Like if you were on a budget, it was the H&R handy rifle or shotgun. If you really wanted like cool single shot handgun hunting or just a cool, unique, beautiful single shot rifle, it was the Thompson Center Contender / Encore. These were made so well and machined so well, you could just buy different barrels. The H&Rs, you weren't supposed to be able to just swap barrels. You had to send them into the factory and they would fit a barrel. But these were machined so precisely that you could just buy different barrels. I think they're a beautiful gun. I own one, although it's a handgun and it's a single shot 22. I like it for really precise handgun iron sight practice, and it slows me down, which can be a benefit if you're really going for, handgun fundamentals. I think they're beautiful. There's plenty of them out there. They're not cheap. They weren't cheap to begin with. But that's the Thompson Center Contender and Encore. I'm hoping they'll make a comeback. I think they did come back for a little while and then went away again. I'm not really sure of the status. And in doing some brief research, I found an even cheaper one, still listed, current production. Rossi apparently makes a single shot rifle. I even learned something on this episode. Rossi makes a single shot rifle, and it is cheaper listing than the CVA as far as price goes. And this one's actually the lightest one that we've talked about heretofore that I've seen listed. Now, Rossi is not made in America, but it's also not made in China by communists or made in Turkey by a bunch of Muslims that would not mind seeing Christians get their head cut off. So there's that, and it's an affordable rifle. And I have actually, honesty, I've been impressed with Rossi rifles in the past. And Traditions, you might know them from their black powder muzzleloader guns. I have some experience with those. They're fine manufacturer. I don't have any experience with their centerfire rifles, but they list quite a few options in the Traditions. And I see them listed as the Traditions G3 single shot rifle and 300 Blackout. That's kind of cool. 357 Magnum, 350 Legend, 35 Remington. That's really cool. 35 Whalen, even cooler. 44 Rem Mag and 4570 Government. So that's pretty decent. And they have a list. This is not MSRP, but what they're listed for on Midway USA. $557 for the first one I popped up, the 300 Blackout. And when I clicked on the 35 Whalen, because that's just cool, it is $479. And it is stainless steel. That's a pretty good price. If you're looking to get into a 35 Whalen, stainless steel, now no iron sights, but hey, that's pretty cool. Okay, so we talked about a bunch of different single-shot rifles. This is not an all-extensive list. I'm not including a lot of the really old antique stuff. I'm not including a lot of the single-shot 22s, which are great. And there might be one out there that I forgot to mention. But these are some of the modern, either currently made or were made in a large number and are not hard to find if you know where to look. Single-shot rifles. All that being said, why? Why in the era of AR-15s that are now 60 years old, themselves a classic? You got to think the ARs were designed in the era of the 1957 Chevy, right? They're not exactly new. They're a 50s design. But even when we've had those for 60 years, why a single-shot rifle? Because you want to challenge yourself. Now, this is getting away from the malum prohibitum. I'm not talking about states that legislate single-shot rifles or municipalities or the straight. I'm not familiar with all the straight wall states and their different. Cartridge has to be this long and of this caliber and all this other stuff. Maybe some of those dictate you have to use a single shot. Maybe next they'll propose, because there's so many people and so little freedom, that you just tie a rock on a stick and club the deer to death. But I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about malum prohibitum and straight wall states and all that stuff. I'm talking about, why would you, when you could use other things legally, why would you hunt with a single shot? Well, first I am going to dispel some myths. Not really, because they're simple. If you look at the amount of moving parts in a lot of these single shot rifles, they're not any simpler than a simple bolt action rifle. Right? There's quite a few moving parts in a single shot rifle. Now, not as many as some other guns, not as many as maybe an AR-15, but they're, I would say, more complex than a good, simple, well-proven bolt-action rifle. So it's not really that. It's not even really weight, because except for the one that I found that was 5 pounds and some, a lot of these weigh as much or more than comparable bolt-action rifles for hunting. It's likely not for accuracy. Now, these rifles can be accurate, very accurate, but not inherently more so than a bolt-action rifle. Right? Because of the way they're made in a bolt-action rifle, the receiver being screwed into the action and the ease of having a free-floated barrel. Right? These, again, a single shot can be accurate, but they're not inherently more accurate than a bolt-action rifle. It's probably not for price anymore, because even those cheaper ones, a lot of times you can find really good bolt-action rifles in those same price points. Right, Savage Axis is a fine bolt-action rifle, especially for the money. Ruger American. And there are others, but those are some of the big ones that are fine, accurate, affordable rifles. So why then, if not legislation, if we're discounting that, why the single-shot rifle? Let's wax philosophical here. To challenge yourself as a hunter. I will often do that. I am a big fan of handgun hunting. I've taken a lot of animals, more than I can remember, with a handgun. You know, just because I like it. It's more of a challenge. I know that I may have to let some animals go that I otherwise could take. Now, I've taken animals with a handgun when I could have used something else, something more powerful, something with longer range. But I took the handgun, and I've hunted with a handgun quite a bit. I enjoy hunting with a handgun. If you enjoy hunting with a single shot, if it gives you that extra motivation, if you just like the extra challenge, you're an avid hunter, you're an accomplished hunter, you've taken many a deer, and you just want the extra challenge to yourself, like man against self, and you want the extra challenge of a single shot rifle, that's a fantastic reason, and you don't have to justify anything else. Why the single shot rifle? Because you want it. Another one, some of the ones we talked about, the Ruger number 1, that Winchester 1885, they're just beautiful rifles. If you just want to hunt with a beautiful rifle and you want to hunt with a beautiful single shot rifle, you want to make sure you get the job done with one good, well-placed shot. And you don't mind all the other things we talked about. That's fantastic. Another real practical reason is safety. I'm talking about teaching not even necessarily a young shooter, although that's often part of it, but a new shooter, young or not. Maybe you've got somebody you want to get them into hunting. Maybe you don't know them all that well, but you still want to kind of take them hunting. Not that other modern rifles aren't safe, but especially with a lot of these break-open guns, you can tell them to keep it broken open until you tell them to close it. You can look over at a glance, make sure they're not climbing over the barbed wire fence with a closed gun. Right? If they're walking behind you, you can tell them to leave it broken open, much like you would do with a shotgun. And that's kind of nice when you're teaching a new shooter that you can visually look at a distance and see that that gun is not going to go off. And this is not exclusive to single shots, but a lot of those have exposed hammers. So even if it is closed, the hammer has to be cocked. So just safety. That is a real tangible, feasible reason that you might choose one of these for, again, a new shooter, a first-time rifle, to make them a good rifleman, to make them slow down if you know their personality, and let's say they're a little bit scatterbrained, they're a little bit complacent, or they're a little bit into the rushing the shot. The single shot is a good tool to kind of ingrain those good habits. And that might even apply to you or me. So those are real good, feasible, tangible reasons why a man may choose a single shot. There's nothing wrong with that. Just because there are AR-15s with a standard capacity of 30 rounds, just because there are similar or more affordable priced, lighter weight bolt-action rifles, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with a single-shot rifle. Any good hunter will tell you, although the rifle is important and the caliber is important and the bullet construction is important, the most important thing is that God blesses you on the hunt and your field craft. And the fact that you know how to read the wind and know how to stalk on an animal and how to be quiet and how to be still when you're supposed to be still, that's probably way more likely to determine a successful hunt or not how many rounds your gun holds. Another reason is maybe you've been caught up in all the race of widgets and whiz-bang stuff, and I gotta have the next greatest laser rangefinder that blah blah. I've got to have the next Gucci camouflage pattern. Multicam is so last year. I had a 7 Rem mag, but then the 7 PRC came out, and it's theoretically 1% better, so I got to have it. Maybe you've been there and done that, and you take a deep breath and go back to basics. You go out this year with a single shot 243. And a plaid shirt and a Jones hat, and you put away the cell phone and the Onyx, and you put meat on the table with that single shot rifle and kind of recalibrate and go back to basics. There's nothing wrong with that either. Alright guys, so with that, I'm going to start bringing this sucker in for a landing here. Now, the reason I'm recording this episode, is I put it for a vote, and this episode won. Maybe it would have came out later, maybe it would have gotten recorded or forgotten about, but people on Patreon voted for this one. I am very grateful to the people on Patreon, and I hope that you are too, and I hope you'll consider becoming a patron. Let me just explain some things to you here. You can get a lot of content for free. YouTube is filled with content. Instagram, all that stuff is filled with content. A lot of those platforms are not super friendly to gun people. Maybe not super friendly to your worldview and world values, your philosophy. And if you want to help change that, you need to support people that you agree with. Maybe that's not me. Maybe I'm not your guy. Maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you're not into the whole duality of firearms for putting meat on the table and protecting yourself. Maybe all you care about is the next new latest and greatest widget and marketing and being pushed something that you probably don't need. But if you are somebody that appreciates Christian content without a bunch of blasphemy and foul language, if you are a man that appreciates not being pushed a bunch of sponsors and a bunch of ads telling you to buy this thing or that thing because they're paying me to and I'm taking a bribe, or if you want to support a small business, employee number one, veteran owned and operated, if you want to support that stuff, it might cost you something. It might cost you a whole $5 a month to put your money where your mouth is. Maybe you're that kind of man that'll step up and support. That's the main reason I want you to become a patron. And as a thank you, you get a lot of really cool insider-only content. Because I do that for you. I do the Patreon for you guys, for the audience, for the community. And it's a pretty cool community on Patreon. I did the rough math. It's hard not to. And I make about as much in one day in my private security contracting job as I make in a month on Patreon. I don't do it for the money. I do it for you guys. I do it to have a platform. I do it because all the hours that go into the podcast should be worth something. And I do it so you guys have a place, a community to go with like-minded individuals. And I put some insider-only content on there, some special content. And the coolest thing that comes out of Patreon is a group of like-minded individuals that can be part of that tight-knit community. So if that interests you, consider becoming a patron. Okay, with that, there should be a Patreon link in the show notes. Your tactical tip of the day. This time of year in a lot of places there's some nasty weather conditions. I was out, it's a funny little side note, I went out quail hunting this morning. I saw 0 quail. I went out rucking this afternoon for a workout out in the wilderness, and the dog flushed 2 covey of quail. But I had a rifle with me. I thought I might see a coyote. Such is life, right? But anyway, this morning, there's been quite a bit of snow lately, and it was right at the temperature where that snow and stuff was melting, and it was nasty and muddy. Those are conditions in a lot of places in a lot of the country. Muddy, wet, nasty conditions. Although you shouldn't forget about it, sometimes you got to put your rifle in a case or in a bag or something after those kind of conditions. Hand warmers. Hand warmers work by taking moisture out of the air and converting it into heat. What makes iron rust? It's oxygen. It interacts differently in water and stuff like that, but the same thing that makes those hand warmers work. Throwing some of those that still have some heat left in them into one of your cases to dry stuff out. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. You shall not circulate a false report. Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. You shall not follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after many to pervert justice. You shall not show partiality to a poor man in his dispute. That was so good. How about some more? How about from the book of Romans? Who doesn't love the book of Romans, right? What devout Christian doesn't love the book of Romans is probably a better way to put that. But God demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. Because we needed saving. Because Jesus was so good, he poured out his blood to save us. Don't take that lightly, and don't take it for granted. And certainly don't turn your nose up at it. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.